Welcome to Business 360. I'm Archana Solanki. Here are the headlines we're tracking this hour. Sensex and Nifty end near their lowest level in 2 months. Stock markets declined for the 5th consecutive week for the first time in 15 months. SoftBank likely to sell shares in Zomato. Sources say the lock-in period for investors post the Blinkit deal ends today. SoftBank owns over 3% stake in the company. That's an exclusive.
Well, a story that my colleague Sapna Das broke last evening, that Mr. Khara is likely to be given an extension for another 10 months. I know you won't comment on that, but any indication at all, sir?
Fingers crossed.
What we are proposing is a concept for the world, which is every business in the world contributes 0.2% of their profits to social development goals, which are a priority for the world.
India Inc. captains submit a communique to the G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant at the B20 Summit. SBI Chairman Dinesh Khara says fingers crossed when asked about a CNBC-TV news break on him getting a 10-month extension. Kotak Mahindra Bank CEO, their Kotak proposes that every global company contribute 0.2% of profits towards social development.
We want to see notable progress on gender diversity.
We really haven't seen the kind of progress in any other field like I'm seeing in AI.
Tata Sons Chairman and B20 Chair N. Chandra says India stands as a beacon of growth on track to achieve 7% average over the next decade. Calls for notable progress on gender diversity. Adobe CEO Shantanu Narayan says that they have multifaceted approach for monetizing generative AI. More headwinds for SpiceJet. The airline fails to deposit Provident Fund of employees for 18 months. TDS not paid since last fiscal. SpiceJet says it has initiated the process and will clear a substantial TDS amount soon. Indian government sources say Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping met briefly during the BRICS summit and had an informal conversation. Add that there was a pending request from the Chinese side for a bilateral meeting. China has claimed that the two leaders spoke on the sidelines of the summit at Modi's request. Grocery e-commerce firm Zepto announces a $200 million fundraise at a $1.4 billion valuation, becomes the first Indian company to enter the Unicorn Club in 2023. The fundraise was led by American private markets investment firm Stepstone Group. Former U.S. President Donald Trump surrenders at a jail after facing charges of illegally trying to overturn Georgia election results, is later released on bond, becomes the first former president to have a mugshot taken. The big newsmaker of the day, America's ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, feels that both the nations should focus on frictionless trade ties rather than enjoying small trade dispute wins. He spoke with my colleague Parikshit Luthra exclusively, and he touched upon issues ranging from the upcoming G20 summit, India's semicon drive, Modi government's IT hardware, import curbs, and much more.
New Delhi is getting ready to host the G20 summit on the 9th and 10th of September, and playing a very important role there will be US President Joe Biden, who will be arriving in New Delhi on the 7th, and he will be here till the 10th of September. Joining us to talk about the US contribution to the G20 and the larger US-India relationship going forward and the key messages for India-US business and trade relationship is Eric Garcetti, US Ambassador to India. Mr. Garcetti, thank you so much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Ambassador, I'd like to begin by asking you, what will be the key message that President Biden will bring to India? Tell us about his agenda from 7th to the 10th of September.
Well, we're so excited to have the president here, who's been here many times, but never as president in India, to celebrate not only the energy that came out of the bilateral visit, the state visit in Washington, but really to celebrate India's leadership of G20 and our joint leadership in the world. You know, it's not India plus the United States. It's India times the United States. When we get together, whether it's health, whether it's the economy, whether it's strategic defense, whether it's the climate work and women's empowerment, we can do a multiplicative amount together. And so I think the first message will be is this is the US-India moment. America loves India. India loves America. But second, it's to lift up the priorities that India is focused on within G20. Everything from the Prime Minister's Life Initiative and looking at what we can do with our personal behavior to improve the environment, to the way that digital infrastructure is changing the way people live here. This is a great moment for our president to witness the new India and also to look at raising our ambitions, even more than we saw in June, which is a new height that we'd never been to before.
I'd like to ask you about the progress that has been made on the G20 so far. Any areas where you are really hoping for substantial outcomes? And as far as the Ukraine-Russia war goes, do you think there can be any communique without strong condemnation of the Ukraine-Russia war?
Well, on that point, no, of course not. This is a line that's been crossed. It's a principle in the globe. Indians know how important sovereignty and borders are. And so we are standing up for that principle with so many partners around the world and across G20. That shouldn't also limit our ability to talk about other things, to look at everything from food, health, debt, looking at infrastructure, the climate crisis, women's empowerment. And India's done a beautiful job in 60 different cities of really raising these questions with key leaders for months ahead. So looking at what's coming out, a high priority for us, of course, is an Indo-Pacific region that's open, free, and fair for everybody. Secondly, looking at ways that we can ensure that the global economic system works for everybody. That's really what the G20 was about, the largest economies of the world. But third, too, to make sure that rules matter. In the global system, without rules, there's chaos. And I think we, as two democracies, people who respect international law, can really model that in a very powerful way.
Right. US and India have never been as close as they are today in terms of business, in terms of trade, in terms of politics, in terms of international affairs as well. If there would be one key vision that you would have for India-US business and trade ties, Ambassador Garcetti, what would that be?
I think we have to go beyond celebrating the end of small trade wars and getting rid of tariffs and conflicts to really building an architecture for the future. If India is going to be a great global economic power, an important supplier in the global supply chain, the innovator for the critical emerging technologies that we're working on together, for our universities and our companies to work together, I think we have to make this a frictionless relationship, one in which Indian goods and services flow freely into the United States and vice versa. There's problems on both sides. We have bureaucracies, old rules in America and in India that sometimes say, okay, we could do this, but it's an exception. We have to make it the rule, not the exception. And I think we'll see billions of dollars building on the record amount of trade, building on the record investments that we have, everything from semiconductors to quantum, agriculture, to the ways that we can do things in space, as we so beautifully witnessed this week here on the moon.
Now, we've seen American companies facing a bit of a setback in the last few weeks because of Indian government's restrictions on import of IT hardware, computer, laptops, and servers as well. What would be your recommendation? Has there been any discussion with the Indian government on this? Has Catherine Tai raised this? And do you think this could be raised in the upcoming visit of the president as well?
We're absolutely engaged. And first and foremost, since we're friends, we want to listen. Where are you trying to go with this policy, and how can we get there together? Similar to the data legislation that came up, when we gave feedback, we were able to help have a discussion together and improve it in a way that works great for India and Indians, but with trusted geography also doesn't limit our friendship and our trade. I would say the same thing. This is good not only because of the laptops that might be sold, but for a company that wants to set up investment here, they need to buy laptops. This becomes a tax on them potentially. How can we achieve those goals, make sure it doesn't hurt the US-India relationship, and achieves what I believe India's goals are, which is to manufacture more here, diversify the global supply chain. I'm confident we can get there together if we keep listening and cooperating.
But do you see this as a setback for companies wanting to sell more here in India? And at the same time, does this send out mixed signals of what we're trying to do?
Were it to go through, I think that is a fair thing we're hearing from many of our companies. Wait a second, whether they're companies that sell laptops and sell tablets, or whether the ones that buy them in country for creating Indian jobs in cities where they're opening offices and adding investments. A semiconductor company needs to buy laptops for their employees. An electric vehicle entity will want to have tablets. And so it's a tax on doing business potentially in India, and we want to make sure that there's nothing that holds back American investment here in India to create jobs here in India and vice versa.
My final set of questions. Tesla has been keenly exploring the Indian market. What is your sense of where have we reached with the talks with Tesla? Could they set up shop? And what about reducing tariffs for the company?
Well, we're excited that there's an office that they've already taken out in Maharashtra. I'm confident that Tesla and other American manufacturers of electric cars can come here. And I think it's important for India. And the message I've heard from Tesla, and I've worked with them for many years, know Elon well, is that they want an infrastructure that doesn't just favor them, but that helps anybody come in here and achieve India's goals of getting the charging infrastructure and the manufacturing base. You can't just do that by saying, mandate, you do it this way. You have to help companies make some money in the first few years to justify the investment in later years. But I love the engagement Prime Minister's had directly, that his office has had, and I'm very optimistic that will work.
US has often spoken about friendshoring, and India is a key partner there. Do you see more investments coming from US companies into India? Any key sectors do you see those investments coming in? What about semiconductors? Is there going to be another big announcement soon?
Absolutely. There's hardly a week that goes by that there's not an American company in the semiconductor space wanting to do more here. $1 billion already of announced investments. But I'd like to see that accelerate more. We want to work with the Indian government to not just talk about the back end where you design, the front end when you package, but that complex middle where that requires the workforce and the training, the skilling, but also the regulations that guarantee over a 10 or 20 year period of time the rules won't change, because you don't make money up front in semiconductors. It takes years of investment in people and in equipment to get there. But I think there's other great sectors. Renewable energy, we're excited about green hydrogen here and Indian investment in that in the United States. Electric vehicles, I look forward to the day that not only American electric vehicles are here, but Indian electric vehicles are being made in the United States. So really, the sky's the limit, or maybe because Vikram landed on the moon, the sky's no longer the limit. It is really the heavens that we can do.
Right. And finally, any work on the IPEF that you see? Any progress?
We see great signs from India, already part of 3 of the 4 pillars. That 4th pillar, we're hearing great things and a great intention from India. We would hope all 4 pillars India would be a part of and be the co-architects of this moment. Forget just looking at narrow agreements. Let's look at new rules that, again, will make this easier to invest, easier to create jobs, easier to help everybody prosper. And we can't do this without India, but stay tuned. I think we're going to have good news there.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Garcetti, for joining us.
And on that note, it's time for a short break, but don't go anywhere. News and updates continue when we return. Stay tuned.
Well, a story that my colleague Sapna Das broke.
We want to see notable progress on gender diversity.
We really haven't seen the kind of progress in any other field like I'm seeing in AI.
Well, a story that my colleague Sapna Das broke last evening, that Mr. Khara is likely to be given an extension for another 10 months. I know you won't comment on that, but any indication at all, sir?
Fingers crossed. What we are proposing is a concept for the world, which is every business in the world contributes 0.2% of their profits to social development goals, which are a priority for the world.
we want to see notable progress on gender diversity.
We really haven't seen the kind of progress in any other field like I'm seeing in AI.
Welcome back to the day's market action now. Sensex and Nifty ended at the lowest level in nearly 2 months after failing to hold on to early gains. Stock markets are in the red for the 5th straight week. This is the worst losing streak in 15 months. Midcap saw some sharper cuts today, but for the week, midcap index has gained 2%, outperforming the blue chips. Prashant Nair is here with the market wrap.
Well, the global cues were negative when we came in this morning, and it was pretty clear that the open will be lower, and we did get about an 80-odd point lower start. Attempts at recovery through the course of the day. There was one which happened around 9:30. I think around 10 o'clock, the market had come up nicely. There was another sharp sell-off, another attempt at a recovery, and then finally, I think in the last hour or so, there was a sell-off which basically took the index right at the day's lowest point. So the Nifty, banks may be a little better. Banks from the day's low saw a larger recovery as compared to the Nifty, but again, down and out. Mid-caps and small-cap indices, 0.5% and 0.75% cuts respectively. So again, no reprieve. Look at the cuts on the large caps. So Adani Ports was a loser. L&T was a significant downtick. Dr. Reddy's, JSW Steel and Adani Enterprises. Actually, this week has been a bit tricky for the Adani group of stocks, which on more days than not have been lower rather than higher. Actually, the Nifty also, by the way, ends the week down, which I think is an important signal. We'll talk about that later. In the broader market, advanced decline was negative. It turned south early on and never recovered. So I'll start with losers. GMR Infra, Shoppers Stop was a big loser. Bajaj Hindustan, BEML, Lodha, which is Macrotech Developers, India Mart, Gulf Oil, Aarti Drugs, Bharat Dynamics were some of the others which were down. Well, gainers as well. Some of the big volume-led gainers in Indiabulls Housing. GMDC has had a good week. Suzlon is back to winning ways. Gabriel India, Parag Milk, Keynes, Sirma, some of these sort of electronic contract manufacturing companies. VST Tillers, Asahi India, Serra Sanitary Ware and InSwift Laboratories were other names which were higher. The Nifty leaves off in a precarious kind of way. If you join the lows that the Nifty saw on the 3rd of August, 14th of August and then 18th of August, there's a falling trend line and the market's left off exactly around that level. The big risk, of course, is from the Powell speech, which is only US time later today. And I think that will determine the course one way or the other when we come back on Monday morning. Back to you.
Right, thank you, Prashant, for that. Meanwhile, shares of Paytm hit fresh 52-week high in trade following news of a 3.6% stake of the company changing hands. However, the stock corrected before closing. The stake, worth over $230 million, is likely to have been offloaded by Antfin. The floor price set at 880 rupees per share is nearly a 3% discount to Thursday's closing price. Shares of Uno Minda ended the day in the red after the company's equity changed hands in a large block deal worth nearly 450 crore rupees. The buyers and sellers in the block deal are unknown. However, sources told CNBC-TV18 earlier that the company's promoters were looking to offload some stake in the open market. Share price of Shoppers Stop plunged nearly 13% after the company's managing director and CEO, Venu Nair, announced his resignation. The company has elevated CEO of HomeStop, Kavindra Mishra, to the position of CEO for a period of 3 years. Nair's resignation will be in effect from August 31st. On to the aviation space now. SpiceJet has been facing multiple headwinds. Sources say the airline may be defaulting on the mandatory statutory dues payment of employees. The airline has been delaying salaries to senior employees. That's not it. The airline is surrounded by several legal liabilities. My colleague Madiha Mujawar joins us with the details. Madiha, things are looking quite worrisome for SpiceJet.
Well, it does look like the cash crunch is getting severe, and there are several signs that point to a distress situation. The airline, as you mentioned, has not deposited the Employee Provident Fund for 18 months. That's a major default and non-compliance of norms. SpiceJet has also not deposited TDS of employees since the last financial year, that is FY23. Now, sources say the airline's vendors too are subject to frustration. They are waiting to receive their pending dues. Then the senior employees, we learn, are not getting their salaries till the third week of the month. And the problems don't end here. The legal headwinds is a separate chapter altogether. SpiceJet has paid only over $2 million of the total $24 million it owes to Credit Suisse. Another dispute is with Kalanidhi Maran. The Delhi High Court has directed Ajay Singh and SpiceJet to pay 390 crore rupees to Kalanidhi Maran, and failure to do so could also lead to attachment of assets. Then there's a dispute with lessors. 5 lessors have filed insolvency pleas against SpiceJet due to non-payment of dues. A quick health check of the airline shows its market share has almost halved from 8% in July 2022 to 4.2% in July 2023. Then the fleet size has also decreased by almost 50%. The airline is flying 31 of the 58 aircraft as 27 planes are on ground. SpiceJet has confirmed the deferral on TDS payment. Responding to CNBC-TV18's query, the airline said that the process for depositing TDS has been initiated and Form 16 is also being gradually released to employees.
Right, thank you, Madhya, for that. World Economic Forum's president is speaking at the B20 Summit to Shireen Bhan. Let's cut across live. Over to you, Shireen.
The conversations continue here at the B20 Summit in New Delhi. Joining me now is the president of the World Economic Forum, Borge Brende. Always great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for joining us. The big takeaway for you from the summit so far?
So the G20 presidency of India couldn't have come at a more pivotal time. India's importance is growing. At the World Economic Forum, we do expect India to overtake the role as the third largest economy in 2-3 years, being larger than Germany and Japan. That also gives India a special role then in this G20 presidency, because the country is growing, it's successful. Then it also can influence and nudge other countries more in the process to agree on something in a polarized world. Because even in a polarized world, there are topics where we need global agreements. There are challenges that travel without passports, being climate change, being pandemics, and etc. So I feel that this will be a very consequential G20 presidency.
You know, you talked about global challenges and you also talked about the need for more global cooperation. We've also got the trade ministers meeting here, coinciding with the leaders meeting at the B20. Now, on that front, how confident do you feel of being able to forge forward, given the many complexities that we see today? There seem to be signals between the US and China to sort of try and approach some kind of a rapprochement at this point in time, even though there are different kinds of restrictions and other measures being imposed. How do you look at what's happening on the trade side today?
So you're right that Secretary Raimondo, the Commerce Secretary in the US, will go to China next week. I think they're building a floor when it comes to their relationship. But the competition between the G2, the US and China, more than 40% of the global economy, I think will continue. We just hope that it will not have too much of negative influence on the global value chains. And if we continue on a path where we introduce new tariffs, that we introduce also new ways of only friend-shoring, near-shoring, and decoupling, it can have a severe impact on global growth. We look at total decoupling would lead to 8 to 10% less of a global GDP, and that's like a very, very deep depression. So it's very serious. But I feel that with the trade ministers here in Delhi today, with India's leadership, I think we can avoid that. Some nearshoring and diversification of value chains do make sense. But let's not lose the baby with the bathwater. So we move into a decade of low growth like we had in the 70s, because growth used to be the engine of growth, and we need to keep it like that.
Speaking of growth, I want to ask you about what the outlook is now, particularly when we speak of Europe. The war continues. There continue to be fresh challenges on food security. The energy security issue continues to be something that we need to confront. Have things gotten worse to your mind since we last spoke in January, or has the needle not moved in any direction either way? Is it status quo?
Quite stable on the negative side, I would say. But there are some silver linings. I think the German economy is struggling because it used to import quite cheap gas from Russia, and they also benefited from growth in the Chinese market, where there were good margins. They have to pivot. On the energy side, I guess that Europe probably can get through this winter too, with the natural gas and the LNG, but there is a challenge moving forward, and the prices are higher, so then the inflation is still there, and also the prices for the products that's being manufactured in Europe is then higher. But there's some glimpse of hope in the French economy, also the Spanish, and even UK is growing. They expected a recession in the in the UK, but it's not there. I think that for India, though, India is doing amazingly well, having this growth. But also India relies on the rest of the world. So also India will run into challenges if we go into sluggish growth.
Right, thank you, Shireen, for that. With that, it's a wrap on this special broadcast. News continues on the other side. Stay tuned.